Hey Changemaker! Welcome to Learning for Good, the only podcast that teaches nonprofit leaders how to leverage training to drive performance, improve capacity, and fuel their mission impact. Do you ever feel like your nonprofit is growing, but your people just aren't keeping up? Or like you're fixing the same problems over and over? Do you wonder how to build confident, capable staff who know how to lead, not just execute? If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I know how hard it can feel to get people to do what's expected of them. Trust me, I have 3 kids. I've tried telling people what to do and how. I've tried the traditional training approaches, and I realized that just doesn't work. And that's when I started researching what does work. Now, I help mission-driven leaders use learning to drive performance, build capacity, and make change that lasts. And I'm sharing it all on this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's Learning for Good.
Nonprofit CEOs left their jobs in record levels in 2025. That's according to nonprofit executive search firm Kittleman Search. They cited the Houston Business Journal saying that 860 CEOs had left their jobs by April. That's generally, and that's the highest number recorded in the January to April timeframe. Of those CEOs, the nonprofit sector had the highest number of CEO exits. We are seeing leadership turnover. According to the Council on Nonprofits, BoardSource conducted a survey in 2021, it's a few years ago, and found that only 29% of nonprofits that were surveyed had a documented succession plan. So we're seeing leadership turnover, and there isn't a plan for future leaders. Now, I've talked about succession planning on the podcast in the past, and I'll drop my conversation with Naomi Hadaway in the show notes. So I don't want us to focus solely on succession planning today. I want us to think about what happened when leaders lead. How having a written succession plan helped. And more importantly, what steps we have to take to ensure the successors are equipped to take on their new roles. And I don't want us to talk theoretically. I want us to hear firsthand from a nonprofit doing this work. So today I brought in Jeremy Bouman from RISE, a Nebraska-based nonprofit dedicated to breaking generational cycles of incarceration. Jeremy is the executive director at RISE, and he and his board have just gone through the succession planning process. He's going to share his wisdom, insights, and lessons learned with us so we can apply it to our own organizations. It's going to be like sitting down with a nonprofit peer and getting an inside look at their organization. You don't want to miss this. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Jeremy Bouman is the founder and CEO of RISE, a Nebraska nonprofit with a mission to break generational cycles of incarceration. RISE offers programming in 7 Nebraska prisons focused on intensive character development, employment readiness, reentry planning, and entrepreneurship. RISE supports continuous post-release through case management, family programming, a business incubator, and employment placement. RISE is also active in policy and advocacy work, and Nebraska's unicameral focused on criminal justice reform. Prior to starting RISE, he served for 7 years as Associate Vice President of Development at Creighton University. Jeremy has 20 years of leadership experience in higher education and nonprofit organizations in New York City, Baltimore, and Omaha. He earned a BA in Communications from Susquehanna University in Pennsylvania and a Master's of Science in Leadership from Creighton University. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thank you, Heather. It's great to be with you.
I can't wait to hear all of the ins and outs of your succession planning process and how you got where you are and what you're doing to really equip leaders to take on those new roles. This is such an interesting time to be in the nonprofit sector. We are seeing staff transitions, leadership transitions. And so the fact that you all were intentional in the succession planning process just speaks volumes of your leadership. And so I'm excited that we get a chance to learn from you today.
Well, good. I'm excited to chat with you about our process and how we got there.
Yeah. Before we get to all the good stuff, I have to know a little bit about your career journey. So how did you get here? You have a little bit of a background in development and academia. So talk to us about that kind of tapestry of Jeremy's career.
Yeah, after college, I moved back to New York City. So I grew up and am from New York and around New York City and New Jersey, and was a entrepreneur, co-owner of a small tech company in the 90s. And really long story short, 9/11 had a real big impact on our infrastructure of our technology for that business. And that was a time of a lot of reflection and very transformational in terms of vocation in my life. And I ended up going to work in my first nonprofit job looking for kind of more purpose and that kind of existential question of why are we here and how are we spending our time. I would say 9/11 was a kind of jarring time that really locked that into focus of how am I going to spend my time? And I'm glad I'm still here. And how can I serve? How can I give back? And so I had my first development job in 2002 in New York City. And since that time, I've been working in nonprofits and higher education for the past 24 years, mostly in development positions, and been in Nebraska here now for 17 years. I worked in higher education at two different universities here. But while I was doing that, I was also volunteering on a weekly basis at the local jail, at the Douglas County Jail in Omaha, and mentoring men who were pretrial. And over a number of years, as I began to get to know people who are system impacted and hear their stories and see common barriers and challenges around generational incarceration and people staying stuck in cycles based on unemployment or underemployment, I really felt compelled to lean in and try to be a part of the solution of how do we break these generational cycles. And we use entrepreneurship and competitive wage employment as some of the levers to help people get out of these systems and stay out. And so that started a journey of founding a nonprofit in 2017 with just me. And today we have 35 staff. We have offices in Omaha and Lincoln, Nebraska. We work in 11 different jails and prisons across the state. We have a number of community-based programs around entrepreneurship training, youth and family programming, employment training and placement, policy and advocacy work. So we've really developed a really holistic and full criminal justice reentry organization here in Nebraska.
Yeah, you're doing such amazing work. So as you think about your organization and where you come from and where you're headed, what was it that prompted you to create a succession plan?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things in particular. The first of which is we're in our ninth year. And as a founder of a newer organization that's not a decade old, really thinking about sustainability and how can we ensure this organization's here long after me as founder is no longer in the picture. And I think seeing a lot of nonprofits that are very founder led that exist as long as that founder wants to do the work. And there's a number of examples I've seen where, and even in our space, in the criminal justice space, really well-intentioned people doing really good work. And when they decide to stop doing it, they haven't really thought about who's going to carry that work on for them. They haven't chosen staff to continue it. And so some of these organizations close. The other example is a dear friend of mine who ran a human services organization here in Omaha. He's my age. He had stepped in as executive director for probably a 40-year-old organization. And over a 7 or 8 year period, he took it from about a $2 million budget to a $6 million budget. Really dynamic, wonderful leader. And he tragically and suddenly passed away. And that was really jarring for me to lose a friend, but then also to see what the impact had on his organization and the strong leadership that he had been providing to that organization. And I was really impressed by their preparation for what to do when he suddenly passed. Their board was very thoughtful about how they engaged the community. They had an interim internal person who stepped in as an interim executive director. They did a national search, but they really listened to the community and they took their time. And after a national search, they named their interim CEO, who had been at the organization in a number of roles over years. They named him permanent CEO, and he was prepared to do that job. But just all of the steps they took and the thoughtfulness, and most importantly, they had no service interruption. Their organization was mourning the loss of their leader. The work needed to continue, but it wasn't chaos. There was a plan. The board stepped in and knew what the plan directed them to do. And, as a founder of my organization, because of those reasons, I just knew I could leave suddenly. And even if I don't and have the ability to be here for a while, we need to be really thoughtful about how to sustain this organization long after I leave. And if something does happen to me, it's my responsibility to make sure the team, the board, everyone is prepared to continue on the mission and replace me. And so that became kind of an urgent call to make sure if something happens here, we know what we're going to do.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm so sorry for the loss of your friend. It's so hard to lose someone suddenly and unexpectedly. Also, as I'm hearing you talk, what a valuable lesson that you were able to take away from the entire situation and to make sure that your organization is prepared in much the same way, because especially when we're talking about nonprofits, right? Like the mission is so much bigger. And if service gets interrupted, if you can't find someone to take the lead in the organization, it's not just the organization that's impacted, it's all the people that you serve. And so I think there's so much value in being proactive and thinking through that leadership succession plan. Now, a lot of people might say, okay, yeah, we need to have a plan, but we kind of know what we're going to do and just kind of leave it at that. But to take the step to go through this process and document the succession plan, that takes time and energy and budget, resources. So what was the value of creating this documented succession plan?
I think for nonprofit leaders, there's a responsibility to plan and to make sure everyone in the organization knows what happens when you're no longer there. It's if you pass away and you don't have an estate plan or a will, or you see that how that happens in families and they don't know, it creates a lot of turmoil and chaos in a time when people are grieving. And when leaders leave, however they leave, there's particularly founders or people who have been in an organization a long time, there's some grieving process. There's a lot of institutional knowledge that walks out the door. And as a leader of an organization, I need to make sure everybody knows where that information is, how to access it, who's doing what in the kind of short, medium, and long term, and what the protocol is for planned short absences, what the protocol is for short, unplanned absences or immediate absences that weren't planned, and what happens in each scenario. And so we really, from our leadership team and our board, reviewed a number of plans that other nonprofits shared with us. And we said, how do we make this really unique to Rise and think about what we really need as an organization and use some of those things as a template to have the conversations we need to have. And as you start getting into it, man, there's so many different components of this that you just thinking about the repository of documentation that people need. You have your donor database, but if there's an immediate transition, who are the 20 people that are most important that the organization needs to call? What triggers the creation of a kind of a special transition committee? Who's the interim leadership? Do they know that they're the interim leadership? What is the plan for your internal staff's training? to prepare them for long-term succession or even short-term stepping in and making sure things keep going. So it seemed like, well, this will be easy. We'll just put a plan together and no, I won't be here forever. But as we got into it, it really merits the time to ask all of those questions of, well, what happens in this scenario? And how do we do this? And who knows this? And really getting that all on paper, it's given us all, I think, a tremendous amount of peace of mind and has, for me, importantly, prepared my leadership team to know what to do and to not have chaos and confusion. I will not be here forever. At some point, that transition will happen. And so that is my responsibility to make sure everybody knows what happens when it does.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective.
Early in my career, I did a brief stint in emergency management and thinking through all the different scenarios and what happens if this happens. And, what if everything is like the roads are shut down and nobody can get to work, and what has to be back up and running immediately? And what do you have time? You have a couple weeks before people are going to start asking for it. And just really thinking through all of those different scenarios, it's fun in a way to think through it. It's like a puzzle.
Yeah.
Trying to put it all together.
Yeah, like a crisis communications plan exercise where if this happens, what are all the things we need to do? And leadership transition, whether it's planned or not, does create some crisis for an organization and a lot of communication that needs to kick in a lot of ways to let people know why and what happened and how program continuity is going to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a challenge that I would imagine happens a lot with succession planning, it definitely happens in the emergency management world, is that you create a plan and it sits on shelf. Because ideally, it's not used all the time. It's not something that you want to pull out every single day because hopefully you're not going through a change like that every single day or an emergency like that every single day. But when it sits on the shelf, there's a risk that it doesn't get used at all, or that it's just a nice document that you worked really hard on and it doesn't actually have an impact on the organization. So how are you using the plan in your role or as an organization? What does that look like?
Yeah, so there's a component of the plan that requires the board to review the plan every year. So just even from a governance standpoint, the board needs to look at it and see what needs to be changed and how do we update it. The plan really focuses on a CEO transition, and that was what we got past. Our board passed our plan for this year. And so next year, all of our C-suite folks who run programming and operations and policy and advocacy, they are working on what their succession plans look like for those other C-suite roles. And so by keeping things going, we have plans for if other executives in the organization, if they leave, what does that look like and what is the plan? A lot of training considerations have come out of this process. There's stuff in the document related to cross-training and the type of cross-training different leaders need to have. What kind of specific trainings do specific leaders need? We have been working internally on different types of leadership training for staff and making sure we have a deep bench of emerging leaders and being really intentional. And we can talk more about what those types of trainings look like and what we do. But it really is a living, breathing document because the preparation and all of the things that you need to do that need to happen in the event of somebody leaving changes new information is found. Things like, okay, who are those people that we need to contact? We need to make that list this year. We need to know the repository of documents and make sure that is updated every year, making sure all of our board policies and governance documents are reviewed annually and updated. That's going to be important for interim leadership and eventually whoever carries the organization forward. So all of that preparation needs to be kind of an ongoing muscle that you keep working, and having the document call for annual review and then bringing it to this next level of leadership is where we're working the plan.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned training and cross training and things like that. So, what steps are you taking to equip the people that are identified for key positions or might be identified for the key positions that you're working on next? What does that look like? How do you bring this to life? I know for the people listening, I do have some nonprofit leaders listen, but I have a lot of nonprofit training folks who listen, and they're probably thinking, okay, great. Like, maybe the organization has this. How can I help support that? Or maybe my organization is going to have this. How can I make sure that I'm positioned to help support that? So, what does it look like? How are you equipping people to take on that next role?
We really feel strongly that everybody in the organization is a leader from whatever seat on the bus they're on. And as an organization that works in the criminal justice system, about 65-70% of our staff are system impacted. Sometimes this is their first professional job, and their lived experience and expertise adds so much richness and value to the programs we build, but we feel a responsibility to provide all folks in the organization leadership development internally. So we do what's called the Rise Leadership Academy. It's a 4-month program that I created and that I personally lead. We do it for 4 hours once a week. And over that 12 weeks, we have cohorts of 8 to 10 that go through it. And they work on things like their personal mission statement, their personal values, what their leadership statement is. We do some assessments just to help people better understand their wiring. We do the DISC assessment. We do Gallup Strengths. We do the ideal team player, Lencioni's humble, hungry, and smart. We do the 6 types of working genius. And we're also working on crucial conversations and emotional intelligence and burnout and just a whole host of different types of leadership things that they go through. And at the end of the 12 weeks, they do a leadership presentation on what they learned and really what their leadership profile is. So that's one component. And then we also do what's called the Rise Innovation Project. And this is an opportunity for people to lead and learn leadership through doing. And so anyone in the organization can look at, how do I solve a business problem that I'm seeing? That's not how we typically will do it, but I'm seeing an opportunity here for some process improvement or some service improvement. And so we have them do a proposal. We have an innovation fair. They share with the whole team what their idea is. People give input at the innovation fair. And then we have them present that to a panel. And then we budget money every year to seed these innovation projects. And people then have a little bit of money in 90 days to execute their project. So it's a small term, fail-safe project. And then they review it and evaluate it. And there's been things over the years that we've then operationalized over the years. So it's an opportunity to do all the things you need to do to become a leader: presenting, testing, piloting, doing the thing, evaluating the thing, and showing whether it worked or not. So those are kind of umbrella leadership trainings that we do. And then everybody in our organization, as a part of their annual review, they have self-care plans because our work is heavy and hard, and they have professional development plans. And so for key leaders that could potentially be interim executive director or whatever the roles are that are opening, we work on cross-training and we work on specific training and coaching. And so some of the components of what an executive director does, we have a few leaders who are going to be doing some fundraising training. It's not their core function, but if they end up at some point, whether here or somewhere else, wanting to be a nonprofit executive director, they're going to need to do some fundraising. or have some background on board governance or operations. So we have really thoughtful trainings for kind of everybody across the organization. And we've worked with some folks who do really high level pro bono executive coaching to tie the training to coaching. And so those are examples of ways that we really try to, people won't stay here forever, but while we have them, we feel a real responsibility to upskill them and to help them grow into their own leadership. And I think that has helped with our retention, and it's also given people an opportunity to grow and stretch in new ways and know that they can do it in an environment where it's okay, it's fail safe, and make small bets on things that may or may not work. And there's just a lot of growth that comes with that.
Yeah, it sounds like you have quite a commitment to learning and growth, and that there's a learning culture that exists as well for people to feel safe enough, right, to take on those innovation projects and to have that ability to try things. And they don't always have to work out exactly as planned. That really requires a lot of psychological safety and trust within an organization. So I think just based on what you've shared, you've really built a robust system and a robust culture that supports learning.
Yeah, I think we have.
That's hard to do. So kudos to you. You built that.
Work in progress.
Yeah. Are you doing all of this, or do you have an L&D person on staff? What does that look like? I know you said you facilitate the Leadership Academy, but
Every year that we look at our budget, our leadership team talks about, is this year we hire an internal trainer? And it can be a thing it's easier to need another case manager or focus in other areas. We have a pretty aggressive growth plan over the next 3 years to go from 35 to 55 or 60 people, very intentionally, with some new programming and things we're doing. And we're getting to a point where having that internal person would be really critical. What I like currently about leading the Leadership Academy is, as we grow, I don't have the opportunities as much with what my responsibilities are to get to know new staff and to get to know frontline staff, for them to get to know me, and to be able to talk about the organization in a safe container without it being a performance related conversation. It helps me see them in action. It helps me understand what their giftedness is as we think about opportunities for growth and new positions in the future. And so I really like that time that I get to build those relationships with kind of all the different levels of the organization. And also, as we grow and we have a diversity of programs, bringing people together from different parts of the organization creates this really nice collaboration and an understanding of what people's, what their strengths are, where to bring them in a different project, giving them some language around those things, and encouraging not to have silos of different parts of the organization. By bringing everyone together around leadership, you're really building those cross-collaborative relationships and people being able to solve problems with different hats on and different perspectives. So that's been great. But yeah, I think we're close to needing an internal training position for sure.
yeah, as somebody who creates training, I know how much work goes into these things. And you're definitely putting a lot of work in and seeing the benefit, seeing the value, which is great. But it is a lot of time and energy, a lot of love and care. Jeremy, what would you say to someone who's starting out on this journey?
I think not to get too intimidated by it, but to just be honest that your leader at some point will leave. Do you have people internally that could step into those roles? If not, what's the plan? If they can, but they need training, what can we do today to equip and prepare people to step into these different roles? Have really transparent, vulnerable conversations with your board. If you're an executive director or someone, say, hey, I'm not going to be here forever. And that's going to fall on you as the governance of the organization. And I want you to know what I think should happen, but I'm not going to be here. You need to own it. You need to really direct what, either in an interim period, this needs to look like, and also kind of long term, what are the values that you need in a leader for the organization moving forward? What does that process look like? You're going to need to provide clarity to the whole team, all the staff. And if you don't have a plan, that can be really challenging if you're making it up as you go along. So take the time now, and our plan's not fancy, and maybe it's 6 pages, but it really provides that roadmap for us. And it also creates the work of what are the next things we need to do for the plan. What are those documents? Who are those people we need to contact? So it gives you that map for you to, with the time over your period of time that makes sense for you, to put these things in place and begin to always be preparing a little bit more for when those transitions do happen.
And we know they do happen. So such important work.
Yeah.
Jeremy, thank you for joining me today.
This is my honor. Great to talk to you.
Your organization's succession plan is a roadmap for the future. If your organization has one, I would highly recommend finding it, reviewing it, and figuring out how you and L&D can support it. And if you don't have one, I would highly recommend starting the conversation with leadership to figure out what needs to happen to get a succession plan in place so that you can start equipping those future leaders. We know that leadership transitions happen, whether they're planned or unexpected. And the more we can prepare for that, the better off we are. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.
Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice, share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.